They said the old man was hiding from the world, but they were wrong. He was guarding something the world had already forgotten, and on certain nights when the wind slowed and the town fell quiet, even the earth beneath his house seemed to remember, to breathe, to wait. And if you stood close enough, you could hear it, a faint hollow echo beneath the stacked firewood, like a memory knocking from below, asking not to be disturbed, but never fully silent either. Daniel Hayes never corrected anyone when they laughed. He never raised his voice when they called him strange or broken or said the war had followed him home and settled somewhere behind his eyes. He simply nodded, tipped his worn cap, and went back to splitting logs in the yard behind his small weathered house at the edge of town, where the road turned to gravel and the trees grew thick enough to swallow sound. His movements slow but steady, like a man who had learned that rushing only made certain things worse. Beside him, always just a step away, stood Rex, a German shepherd with a sable coat dark along the spine and lighter at the chest, his amber eyes never still, always watching, always listening, not to the people, not to the passing trucks or distant voices, but to something deeper, something that lived under the ground they stood on. Rex didn't bark often, not without reason, but when he did, it wasn't loud or frantic, it was low, deliberate, the kind of sound that carried weight, the kind that made even strangers hesitate without knowing why. The firewood was stacked in perfect rows behind the house, cut clean, dried just right, arranged with a precision that felt almost ceremonial. And that was the part they mocked the most, not the house, not the man, but the way he guarded that would like it was worth more than the land itself. Teenagers drove by sometimes, slowing just enough to point and laugh. Phones out, capturing the crazy vet guarding his woodpile. Their voices careless, light, unaware of the silence that followed them once they were gone, a silence that pressed in like a held breath. Daniel would pause for just a second after the laughter faded, his hand resting on the handle of the axe, his eyes drifting not to the road, but to the ground near the base of the stack, as if checking, as if listening. Then Rex would shift closer, brushing against his leg, steady, present, and Daniel would exhale, barely noticeable, before returning to his work, because some things didn't need explaining, not to people who only saw what was on the surface, not to those who had never learned that the quietest places often held the loudest truths. The house itself was nothing special, a single-story structure with peeling paint and a porch that creaked under weight, but it stood firm, like its owner, weathered but unyielding, and beneath it, though no one in town truly believed it, there was a space, an underground shelter poured in concrete decades ago, hidden by time and sealed by purpose, the kind of place built not for comfort, but for survival, the kind of place that didn't forget what it was made for. And on nights when the air turned cold and still, when even the insects seemed to hold their noise, Daniel would sit on the porch steps, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand, while Rex lay at his feet, head lifted, ears twitching toward the ground, and they would both listen, not with fear, not with urgency, but with a quiet understanding, like two sentries who knew their post mattered even if no one else did, because long before the town ever noticed the old man and his dog, long before the laughter and the whispers, there had been something else, something buried beneath that house, something that did not burn, did not fade, and did not forget, and whether the world chose to believe it or not, Daniel Hayes had made a promise to it, and Rex, without ever needing to be told, had chosen to keep that promise with him. By the time the sun rises over the tree line, the town is already awake with quiet judgment, the kind that does not shout but lingers in glances and half-spoken comments at the gas station, at the diner, at the edge of conversations that stop the moment Daniel Hayes steps inside, boots carrying in the scent of pine and dry earth, his presence enough to shift the air without a single word being said. He orders the same thing every morning, black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and he sits by the window where he can see the road, not because he expects anyone, but because habits like that are hard to break once they have kept you alive. The waitress, a woman in her late 40s named Carol, always sets the cup down a little softer than necessary, as if careful not to disturb something unseen. She does not ask questions. She learned early that Daniel does not answer them, but she notices the way Rex waits outside, never tied, never wandering, sitting near the door with his posture straight and eyes alert, not watching people, not begging for attention, just waiting, like a soldier still on duty long after the orders have stopped coming. Outside, two men in work jackets lean against a pickup truck, their voices low but not low enough, saying things like he could have sold that land years ago, saying the developers are offering good money now, saying nobody needs a bunker anymore, especially not under a house that looks like it might fall apart in the next storm. One of them laughs, a short, careless sound, and gestures toward the woods, talking about how the old man probably thinks the world is still ending, how he guards that firewood like it is gold, how it is all just a relic of a war that ended long ago. Daniel hears it, of course he does, but he does not turn, does not react. He lifts the coffee slowly, takes a sip, and keeps his gaze on the road, because there are things you learn to carry without setting them down and explaining them to people who have never felt that. Weight only makes them heavier. When he finishes, he leaves exact change on the table, nods once to Carol, and steps back into the morning air where Rex rises immediately, falling into step beside him without needing a command. Their walk back is quiet, gravel crunching under boots and paws, the kind of quiet that does not feel empty but full, like something just beneath the surface is listening back. When they reach the house, Daniel pauses before the firewood, just for a moment, his eyes tracing the lines, counting without counting, checking without touching. Rex moves ahead this time, closer than usual, his nose hovering just above the ground near the base of the stack, his body still but not relaxed, ears tilted slightly forward, and then he lets out a low sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a warning, something in between, something that feels like recognition. Daniel notices, of course he notices, he always notices when Rex does that. But instead of reacting immediately, he sets down his keys on the porch railing and walks slowly toward the stack, his boots careful, measured, as if stepping too hard might disturb more than just dirt and wood. He crouches slightly, not fully, just enough to lower himself closer to the ground, and for a brief second, the air shifts. The faint scent of old metal and something like cooled smoke rises from below, so subtle it would be easy to dismiss if you did not know what to look for. Rex stiffens beside him, pressing closer, his shoulder brushing Daniel's arm, grounding him, reminding him of the present even as the past presses up from beneath their feet. Daniel exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries years in it, and places his hand flat against one of the logs, not gripping, not moving it, just resting there, as if acknowledging something on the other side, as if answering a call that has not used words in a very long time. Then he stands, straightens his back, and steps away, not out of fear, not out of doubt, but because some things are not meant to be uncovered before their time. And as the wind picks up just enough to stir the leaves overhead, carrying with it a faint whisper through the trees, Rex turns his head sharply toward the ground once more, listening, always listening, as if whatever lies beneath has begun, slowly, almost imperceptibly, to stir again. By late afternoon, the town begins to gather its noise again. Trucks rolling slower past Daniel's property than they need to, windows lowered just enough for voices to carry, curiosity dressed as casual conversation. And on this particular day, the sky hangs low with a dull gray weight, the kind that presses sound downward so even the smallest remark feels closer than it should. 3 vehicles pull up along the edge of the gravel road, not blocking it, not trespassing, just close enough to be seen, to be noticed, to make a point without saying it outright. Among them is a man named Curtis Hale, mid-50s, clean boots that have never known real dirt, a pressed shirt tucked too neatly for a place like this, the kind of man who speaks with confidence shaped by contracts and signatures rather than seasons and survival. He steps out slowly, glancing around as if measuring value in everything his eyes touch, the house, the trees, the worn fence, and finally the stacked firewood. His gaze lingers there longer than expected, not because he understands it, but because he does not. And people like Curtis do not like things they cannot explain. Daniel stands in the yard, with an axe resting against his shoulder, not raised, not defensive, simply present, Rex at his side, closer than usual, his body angled slightly forward, not aggressive, just aware, always aware. Curtis offers a polite nod that does not reach his eyes, and begins speaking about opportunity, about development plans, about how the land could be turned into something useful, something profitable. Words like progress and future slipping easily from his mouth as if they belong everywhere, even here. Daniel listens without interrupting, his expression unchanged. But Rex does not look at Curtis, not once. His attention remains fixed on the ground near the base of the firewood stack, his ears shifting in small, precise movements, catching something no one else seems to hear. Curtis notices the dog eventually, gives a short, amused breath, and gestures toward the wood, asking what exactly is so important about that pile, asking why a man would choose to live like this when he could walk away, with enough money to start over somewhere better, somewhere easier. Daniel lowers the axe slowly, setting it against the stump, and for a moment he says nothing. The wind moves through the trees in a soft, uneven pattern, carrying with it that faint metallic scent again. So light it barely exists, but it is there. It has always been there. Curtis steps closer, not crossing any line that can be named, but close enough to test one that cannot. His boot scuffs the dirt near the base of the stack. Just a small, careless movement, and that is when Rex reacts, not with a bark, not with a lunge, but with a deep, steady sound that rises from his chest and holds, a warning that feels older than training, older than instinct, something rooted deeper. Curtis pauses, surprised more than threatened, and lifts his foot back slightly. The others behind him exchange glances. The laughter that usually comes so easily does not arrive this time, because there is something in that sound, something that does not belong to a simple dog guarding a pile of wood. Daniel finally speaks, his voice low, even, carrying no anger, only certainty. He says it is not for sale, not the house, not the land, not what is beneath it. Curtis smiles again, thinner now, less certain, and says everything has a price. Daniel does not respond. He just places his hand briefly on Rex's shoulder, a quiet signal, not to calm him, but to acknowledge him, because Rex is not reacting to the man. He is reacting to something else, something shifting beneath the surface, something that has started to move in ways it has not for a very long time. The air changes again, subtle but real, the ground holding a tension that does not release. Curtis steps back this time, not because he has been told to, but because something in him decides it is the right distance. He clears his throat, says they will be in touch, says offers like this do not last forever, and turns toward his truck. The others follow, their earlier confidence replaced with something quieter, something uncertain. Engines start, gravel spits under tires, and within moments they are gone. The road empty again, but the silence they leave behind is different, heavier. Daniel stands still for a few seconds longer, then looks down at the firewood, not with doubt, not with fear, but with recognition, as if whatever lies beneath has answered in its own way. Rex steps forward, placing himself between Daniel and the stack, his posture firm, unwavering, a silent promise that whatever comes next, he will not let it rise alone. That night does not arrive all at once. It settles slowly over the land like a weight that has been waiting its turn, the last traces of daylight fading behind the tree line, while the air cools just enough to carry every sound farther than it should. Daniel sits on the edge of the porch with the same black coffee in his hands, untouched now, long gone cold, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the firewood, but not quite into the trees either, as if he is watching a space that exists between things. Rex does not lie down this time. He remains standing, pacing in a tight, controlled line between the porch and the stacked wood, his movements measured but restless, the kind of restlessness that does not come from energy but from awareness, his ears flicking at intervals that do not match the wind, his head tilting slightly, as if aligning himself with a rhythm too faint for human hearing. And then it comes again, not a sound exactly, more like a pressure, a subtle shift beneath the ground that carries through the soles of boots and into bone. Daniel feels it before he fully registers it, his fingers tightening slightly around the cup, not in fear but in recognition. He has felt this before, not here, not exactly like this, but close enough that his body remembers before his mind does. Rex stops pacing, freezes in place with one paw lifted just barely off the ground, his entire body focused downward. The silence around them deepens, not empty, but full, like something is holding its breath, waiting. Daniel sets the cup down slowly on the wooden step, the faint clink of ceramic against wood sounding louder than it should, and rises to his feet, each movement deliberate, each step toward the firewood taken with the same care he would use approaching something fragile and important. The wind dies almost completely now, leaves settling into stillness. Even the distant hum of the town seems to fall away, leaving only the quiet and that presence beneath it. Rex lets out a low sound, softer than before, not a warning this time. Something closer to a call, something that carries familiarity, as if whatever lies beneath is not a stranger to him. Daniel reaches the edge of the stack and pauses, his hand hovering just inches from the wood. And for a moment, he closes his eyes, not in hesitation, but in listening. Because this is not something you look at first, it is something you feel, something you allow to reach you in its own way. The scent rises again. Stronger now, not overwhelming but undeniable, old metal, earth. And something else layered beneath it, something that feels like memory more than matter. And then there is a sound, faint but clear enough this time that it cannot be dismissed, a soft hollow tap from below, followed by a pause. And then another, not random, not accidental, but spaced, deliberate, like a signal. Trying to remember how to be heard, Rex lowers his paw and steps closer to the stack, placing himself directly in front of it, his head dipping slightly as if aligning with the source. His tail still, his body calm but charged. Daniel opens his eyes and exhales slowly, the breath carrying something heavier than air. Years of silence, of promises made without witnesses, of things buried not because they were forgotten, but because they were meant to be kept. He kneels this time, fully, his knee pressing into the cool dirt, his hand finally resting against one of the logs. And the moment he makes contact, the tapping stops, not abruptly, but as if it has been acknowledged, as if whatever is below has received its answer. Rex lets out a quiet breath, almost a sigh, and sits beside him, not breaking his focus, just sharing it. The two of them holding that space together in a way that does not need explanation. Daniel's other hand moves slowly to his chest, slipping beneath his shirt just enough to pull free the thin chain he always wears, the dog tags resting against his palm, worn smooth at the edges from years of being carried. He does not look at them. He does not need to. He knows every mark, every letter, every weight they hold. And for a brief second, the night seems to lean in closer, as if listening, as if remembering with him. Then he lowers the tags, not placing them on the ground, not yet, just holding them near the wood, near the place where the sound came from. A quiet offering, a silent acknowledgement that whatever lies beneath is not alone, has never been alone. And as the wind finally returns in a soft, uncertain breath through the trees, Rex lifts his head and looks out into the darkness beyond the yard, his eyes narrowing slightly, because something else has changed now, something above ground, something approaching, and whatever is coming, it does not understand what it is walking toward. The sound of the approaching engine comes low at first, distant enough to be mistaken for wind moving through the hills, but Rex does not mistake it, his head lifting higher, ears locking forward with precision, his body shifting from stillness into readiness without a single wasted motion. Daniel feels it in the same moment, not just the vibration of tires on gravel, but the intent behind it, the kind of presence that does not pass by quietly. Headlights appear through the trees, cutting thin lines of pale yellow between trunks before widening into the open stretch of road that leads to the house. The vehicle slows as it nears, not out of caution but curiosity, and then it stops just short of the property line, engine idling, lights still on, casting long shadows across the yard that stretch all the way to the firewood stack. Daniel remains where he is for a second longer, kneeling beside the wood, the dog tag still resting in his palm, as if weighing a decision that has already been made long ago. Rex steps forward first, placing himself between Daniel and the road, not aggressively, just firmly, a quiet line drawn without words. The driver door opens and Curtis Hale steps out again, this time without the others. Without the practiced ease he carried earlier, his movements slower now, less certain, like a man who has come back not to negotiate but to confirm something he does not fully understand. The night air shifts as he walks a few steps closer, his boots crunching softly against gravel, and for the first time he does not speak right away. His eyes move from Daniel to the firewood, then briefly to Rex. And there is something different there now, not fear exactly, but awareness. Daniel rises slowly to his feet, the motion steady and controlled, the dog tags slipping back beneath his shirt, disappearing once more against his chest where they belong. He does not ask why Curtis has returned. He does not need to. Because some questions answer themselves the moment someone shows up uninvited after dark. Curtis finally clears his throat and says he could not sleep, says something about the place not feeling right, about the ground, about how when he drove away earlier it felt like he had left something unfinished behind. The words sound strange even to him, like they do not belong to the kind of man he usually is. Daniel studies him quietly, not judging, not welcoming, just listening, because sometimes the truth finds its way into people whether they want it or not. Rex lets out a low breath, not a growl this time, something calmer, almost like recognition again, as if he has decided that Curtis is not the danger, not tonight. The real tension still lies beneath them, waiting. The wind moves gently now, brushing through the trees with a soft, restless whisper, carrying that same faint metallic scent stronger than before, enough that Curtis notices it this time. His nose wrinkling slightly as he looks down at the ground near the firewood, his foot shifting as if testing the firmness beneath him. And for a brief second, the earth answers, not with movement that can be seen, but with a subtle give, a hollow echo that travels upward just enough to be felt through the soles of his boots. Curtis freezes, his breath catching in a way he does not expect, and his eyes lift slowly to Daniel, searching for an explanation. But Daniel does not offer one. He simply steps closer to the stack again, placing himself beside Rex, his presence steady, grounded, as if anchoring something unseen. There is a moment where everything holds still. The air, the trees, even the distant hum of the town fades into nothing. And then it happens again, clearer this time. A soft, deliberate knock from beneath the earth, not loud, not violent, but undeniable, spaced just enough to feel intentional. Curtis takes a small step back without realizing it, his usual composure slipping just slightly as the sound settles into his chest. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief moment, the corners of his face tightening not in fear but in memory, and when he opens them again, there is something deeper there, something that has been waiting a long time. Rex lowers himself to the ground directly in front of the stack, his body aligned with the source, calm and unwavering, as if standing guard not against what is coming, but for it. And Curtis, for the first time since he arrived in this town, does not speak, does not question. He simply stands there in the quiet, realizing that whatever this place holds, it is not something that can be bought, not something that can be moved, and certainly not something that ever truly left. The night stretches longer than it should, as if time itself hesitates to move forward, caught somewhere between what has already happened and what is about to reveal itself. Curtis remains where he stands, his breath slower now, more deliberate, as though each inhale carries something heavier than air. His eyes no longer scanning for opportunity but fixed on the ground in front of him, trying to understand a language he has never been taught. Daniel does not rush him, does not fill the silence, because silence is the only thing that has ever held this place together. And Rex, still lying at the base of the firewood, shifts just slightly, not to rise, not to move away, but to settle deeper into his position, as if anchoring himself to something below, something that has begun to stir not in threat, but in memory. The wind fades again, leaving behind a stillness so complete it almost hums. And then, slowly, Daniel takes a step forward, not toward Curtis, not toward the house, but toward the stack itself, his boots pressing into the dirt with quiet certainty. He kneels once more, this time without hesitation, his hand moving with purpose to the side of the firewood, fingers tracing along the edges until they find a place where the pattern breaks, where the order is not as perfect as it seems. Rex lifts his head slightly, watching, not questioning, because he already knows. Daniel grips one of the logs and pulls it free, the movement smooth, practiced, revealing beneath it not more wood, but a narrow metal latch, worn by time, but still intact, the faint scent of iron rising stronger now as the cool night air touches what has been hidden. Curtis takes a step closer without meaning to, drawn by something he cannot name, his voice, barely above a whisper as he asks what this is. But Daniel does not answer him. Not yet. Instead, he places his hand on the latch and pauses, not out of doubt, but out of respect, because this is not just a door, not just an entrance. It is a threshold that was never meant for the curious, only for those who understand what it holds. Rex stands now, moving beside Daniel, his body close, steady, his presence not protective but present, as if standing witness to something long overdue. Daniel exhales slowly, the sound quiet but final, and lifts the latch, the metal giving with a soft, hollow click that echoes deeper than it should. The ground seems to respond, not shifting, not breaking, but acknowledging the faintest release of pressure rising up through the earth. And then Daniel begins to move the wood aside, one piece at a time, each motion deliberate, revealing a reinforced panel beneath, weathered but unbroken, its surface marked by time but not weakened by it. Curtis watches in silence, the pieces of his understanding rearranging themselves with each second, the idea of value, of ownership, of control slipping quietly away, replaced by something else, something older, something that does not belong to contracts or signatures. Daniel finishes clearing just enough space and places his hand flat against the panel, closing his eyes for a brief moment as if listening once more. And this time, the response comes not as a knock, but as a feeling, a steady presence rising to meet him. Rex lowers his head slightly, ears forward, calm, unwavering, as if recognizing a familiar voice without sound. Daniel opens his eyes and pulls the panel upward, slowly, the hinges releasing with a muted groan that carries the weight of years, and beneath it, darkness. Not empty, not cold, but full, holding the scent of earth and metal and something else that lingers like memory. The kind of darkness that does not threaten but waits. Curtis steps closer to the edge now, his hesitation replaced by something quieter, almost reverent. He looks down into the opening, his reflection faint in the shadow below, and for the first time, he does not ask what it is worth, he asks what it is. And Daniel finally speaks, his voice low, steady, carrying not explanation but truth. He says it is where they waited, where they held on when there was nowhere else to go, where promises were made that did not end when the war did. His words settle into the night like something returning to its place. Rex remains at his side, unmoving, eyes fixed on the opening, as if guarding not against what might come out, but for what has always been there. And Curtis, standing at the edge of something he cannot own and cannot change, realizes that some places are not meant to be understood all at once. They are meant to be remembered slowly, one quiet truth at a time. The darkness below does not feel empty as Curtis expected. It feels occupied, not by movement or sound, but by presence, the kind that settles into a place and becomes part of it. Daniel steps down first, his boots finding the old metal rung without hesitation, his hand steady against the edge as he lowers himself into the shelter. Rex follows without being called, placing each paw with quiet precision, his body moving with familiarity, as if he has walked this path before in ways that do not belong to time alone. Curtis hesitates at the edge for a moment longer, looking down into the dim space where the faint outline of walls begins to take shape. Then he exhales and steps forward, not out of courage, but because something deeper than fear is pulling him closer. The air below is cooler, carrying that same scent of iron and aged wood, but layered now with something else, something almost human in its weight, like a room that has held breath for too long. Daniel reaches the floor and stands still for a second, allowing his eyes to adjust, his hand brushing lightly against the wall as if greeting it, not inspecting, not testing, just acknowledging. A small battery lantern sits on a shelf to the side, untouched for years but still there. He lifts it, turns the switch, and a soft glow fills the space. Not bright, not harsh, just enough to reveal what has been waiting. The walls are reinforced, concrete worn smooth in places, marked by faint scratches and lines that do not form words but carry intention. Along one side rests an old wooden bench, sturdy, unchanged, and above it, a row of hooks where something once hung, now empty except for a single chain that sways just slightly, though there is no wind to move it. Rex moves ahead slowly, nose low, tracing a path across the floor until he stops near the far wall, his body still again, ears forward, listening not to the room, but through it. Daniel follows his gaze, and there, partially set into the wall, is a small recessed space, almost easy to miss if you are not looking for it. He steps closer, each movement slower now, more careful, as if approaching something that deserves more than simple attention. Curtis remains near the ladder, not venturing far, his eyes moving across the shelter with a quiet disbelief that no longer seeks explanation, only understanding. Daniel kneels in front of the recessed space and reaches inside, his fingers brushing against something solid, something smooth. He pauses for just a moment, then lifts it out into the light. It is a small metal box, worn at the edges, its surface marked by time but not damaged, the kind of object that has been placed, not forgotten. Rex steps closer, lowering his head beside Daniel, his presence steady, watchful. Daniel opens the box slowly, the hinge giving with a soft sound that seems louder than it should in the stillness. Inside are items that do not speak loudly but carry weight all the same. A folded cloth, a small photograph faded, but intact, and beneath them, a second set of dog tags, different from the ones Daniel wears, older, heavier somehow, as if they have carried more silence. Daniel's hand trembles just slightly as he lifts them, not from weakness, but from memory, his thumb brushing over the engraved letters, tracing them without needing to read, because he already knows every line, every mark. The room seems to settle deeper around him, the air thickening with something that feels like recognition, like a presence answering its name after years of waiting. Rex lets out a soft breath, almost a whisper of sound, and leans gently against Daniel's shoulder, grounding him in the present while the past rises quietly to meet them. Curtis watches from where he stands, his earlier certainty gone entirely now, replaced by something quieter, something closer to respect. He does not ask questions, not this time, because he understands, finally, that this is not about land or value or anything that can be measured. This is about something kept, something held through time without witness. Daniel lowers his head slightly, the second set of tags resting in his palm, his voice barely above a whisper as he speaks a name into the space, not for Curtis, not even for himself, but for whatever has been waiting to hear it again. And in that moment, the shelter does not feel like a hidden place beneath the earth. It feels like a promise finally being remembered, not in words, but in the quiet presence of a man and a dog who never left their post. The name lingers in the air long after Daniel speaks it, not echoing, not fading, but settling into the walls as if it had always belonged there. And for a moment no one moves, not Daniel, not Curtis, not even Rex, who stands with his head lowered and ears slightly back in a posture that is not submission but recognition, as if he understands that this space is no longer just guarded, it is being honored. Daniel closes his fingers gently around the second set of dog tags, his thumb pressing once more across the worn metal before he exhales slowly, a breath that seems to carry years of waiting with it. And then, with a care that feels almost ceremonial, he places the tags back inside the box, folding the cloth over them. With steady hands, not hiding them, not sealing them away, but returning them to the place they were meant to rest. The lantern light flickers softly against the concrete walls, casting shadows that move just enough to suggest presence without revealing anything new. Curtis finally takes a step closer, not toward Daniel directly, but toward the space itself, his movements slower now, stripped of the confidence he arrived with earlier, replaced by something quieter, something closer to humility. He looks at the box, then at the walls, then at the ground beneath his feet, and for the first time, he removes his hat, not out of habit, but because something in him understands that this is not a place for anything less than respect. Daniel notices, but does not comment, because respect that is spoken often carries less weight than respect that is shown. Rex shifts slightly, moving to stand between Daniel and Curtis again. But this time it is not a barrier, it is a bridge, his presence steady, allowing but also reminding, a silent line that says you may witness, but you do not claim. Curtis nods once, more to himself than to anyone else, and steps back again, giving the space what it has always been owed. Daniel lifts the box one last time, holding it for a brief moment against his chest, just above where his own tags rest beneath his shirt, and there is something in that motion that completes a circle no one else can see. Then he returns the box to its place within the wall, sliding it back carefully until it rests exactly where it belongs, not hidden, not displayed, simply held. Rex watches the movement closely, then lowers himself to the ground beside the wall, his body relaxing for the first time since they entered, as if whatever needed to be acknowledged has now been answered. The air in the shelter shifts again, lighter somehow, not because something is left, but because something has been recognized. Curtis takes another step back toward the ladder, his eyes lingering on the space a moment longer before he looks to Daniel. And though he does not speak, the change is clear. Whatever he came here for is gone, replaced by something he cannot take with him but will not leave behind entirely either. Daniel nods once, a small gesture. Not dismissing, not inviting, just acknowledging that the moment has passed, and together, without urgency, they begin to move back toward the surface, one step at a time, the lantern light dimming behind them as the night air returns to meet them above. And when they finally step back onto the ground, the firewood stands just as it did before, stacked, silent, unremarkable to anyone who does not know. But beneath it, something has changed, not in form, not in structure, but in presence, as if the earth itself has exhaled after holding something too long. Rex turns once more toward the stack, his gaze steady, calm, no longer searching, only watching, and Daniel rests his hand briefly on the wood, not to check, not to confirm, but to remember, because some things are not meant to be uncovered again. They are meant to be kept, quietly, faithfully, exactly where they are. Morning comes quietly, the kind of morning that does not rush the night away, but lets it settle gently into memory, the sky pale and wide above the trees, the air cool with the faint scent of damp earth and wood. Daniel is already outside when the first light touches the edge of the firewood stack, his hands steady as he begins to place each log back into its original order, one by one, not hurried, not distracted, but deliberate. As if restoring more than just a pile of wood, Rex moves beside him, not pacing now, not searching, but calm, his presence settled into something deeper, something resolved, his amber eyes no longer scanning the ground for signs of movement, but resting on Daniel, following each motion with quiet understanding. The world around them feels different, not changed in a way that can be seen, but in a way that can be felt, like a weight that has finally shifted, not removed, but carried differently. The road remains empty for a long while. No trucks slowing, no voices drifting from passing windows, as if the town itself has decided, without knowing why, to give this place a wider space to breathe. And when Curtis finally returns, it is not with an engine that announces itself, but on foot, his steps measured, slower than before, his hands empty. No papers, no offers, no intentions to persuade. He stops at the edge of the yard and does not cross it, not because he cannot, but because he understands now that some boundaries are not marked by fences or signs. Daniel notices him, of course, but he does not stop working. He finishes placing one final piece of wood, adjusts it slightly until it aligns with the rest, and only then does he turn, Rex standing quietly at his side. Curtis removes his hat again, holding it in both hands this time, his posture different now, less certain of himself, but more certain of what matters. He does not speak right away, and when he does, his voice is softer, stripped of the tone it once carried. He says he will withdraw the offer, that the land is not for sale, that it never really was, not in the way he thought. Daniel nods once, a small gesture that carries no triumph, no relief, only acknowledgement, because this was never about winning. It was about keeping. Curtis glances toward the firewood, his eyes lingering there for a moment longer, not trying to see through it, not trying to understand everything, just recognizing that something important rests beneath it, something that does not belong to him and never will. He places his hat back on his head, gives a final nod, and turns away, his steps steady as he walks back toward the road, not looking back this time, because some lessons do not need repeating. Daniel watches him go for only a moment before turning back to the yard, his hand resting briefly against the wood, not checking, not guarding, but remembering. Rex sits beside the stack, his body relaxed, his breathing even, his ears no longer tuned to something beneath the ground, but to the present, to the quiet that has finally settled into place. The wind moves gently through the trees, carrying with it no warning, no signal, only the soft sound of leaves shifting in the morning light. And for the first time in a long while, the earth beneath them feels still, not silent, not empty, but at peace. Daniel steps back, looking at the stack one last time before turning toward the porch, his movements lighter, not because the weight is gone, but because it has been shared, acknowledged, honored. and Rex follows without hesitation, falling into step beside him, as he always has, as he always will, because some bonds are not forged in moments of ease. They are built in the quiet spaces where promises are kept long after they are made. And though the world beyond the trees will continue as it always does, loud, hurried, unaware, here, in this small place at the edge of it all, something remains, something steady, something unseen but never forgotten, held not by walls or wood, but by loyalty, by memory, and by the kind of faith that does not need to be spoken to be understood.